Hey guys, Jason here with a very exciting Duel Masters deck profile. Well, I like to think all of our deck profiles are pretty exciting, but this one especially because it centers on one of the most beloved races in the game, dragons. Now, in our last dragon deck, we tried to build it around Uberdragon Bajula, and we introduced water to try to make it more consistent and efficient with its card advantage. But what I realized was that was pretty pointless, because if you tried to make it play like a more traditional deck, you would still always be less consistent than those traditional decks you're trying to emulate because of all the dragons and chunky boys that you are running. So what I decided to do is I wanted to lean harder into the gimmick of just summoning dragons and forcing your opponent to deal with them, and that meant water had to go. Instead, we are more heavily abusing mana acceleration, which includes 4 fairy life, 4 poisonous mushroom, 4 bronze arm tribes, and of course 4 soul swap. So the inclusion of poisonous mushroom was Andrew's idea. Originally, I thought 4 fairy life and 4 bronze arms would be sufficient just because we don't want to deplete our hand too quickly. But then Andrew said, no, we need more mana acceleration, so 4 poisonous mushrooms. And that actually has amazing synergy with soul swap. I guess that's why we call it the soul swap engine. You just get all your dragons into mana really quickly, and you try to cheat it out with soul swap really quickly. With Poisonous Mushroom, you have great synergy because Poisonous Mushroom can put one of the dragons in your hand into mana, and then later on, when you soul swap, you can just trade this guy. So this is the nature engine, and this is what we are going to be playing, or this is what we want to play early in the game. Now, the next thing we are following up with is 4 copies of Coca Lupia. This isn't a very surprising card, if I'm being perfectly honest. Dragon decks need them. Probably not the most efficient card to have, but if Coca Lupia manages to stick, then you're really off to the races because you can start cheating more of your big dragons into play. So after this, our mana curve gets really steep, and we say hello to our dragons. The first of which is Super Dragon Machine Dolzark. This guy is pretty good, not as good as he is in DM Plays, because in DM Plays, his natural snare ability can trigger off himself. In the TCG, you need it to trigger off another dragon, so another of your dragons has to attack, and he can't just be the one to attack. But he's still pretty good. He's very useful against aggressive decks because he's a means of board control. We aren't playing too many board clears in this deck just because we don't have room for it. So what we do is, let's say your opponent is trying to rush you down with multiple creatures. Well, what you can do is you can attack with another one of your dragons, and then if this guy is out, you get rid of 2 creatures at once. It's also very useful against decks with blockers because he is a means of clearing blockers, and that puts a lot of pressure on the opponent. Because he fulfills 2 mana sources, he is one of your candidates for turn 1 charging and Poisonous Mushroom charging. Another one of the dragons we are playing is Magmadragon Jagalzor, who we also have 2 copies of. Magmadragon Jagalzor is okay. He's kind of like our substitute Galzark in a manner of speaking, since Andrew drew a lot of inspiration from Duel Masters Plays. I think Dragalzor is okay. He's really there for the surprise burst potential in his Turbo Rush ability. So let's say there's some miraculous turn where you're able to cheat 2 dragons into play, maybe one through Coca Lupia and then summoning it from your hand, and then another one soul swap. You could just, clear a lot of shields in that situation. We also think, though, that Magmadragon Jagalzor is probably the least powerful dragon, or at least generally useful dragon in this deck, which is why we only have 2 copies, but he's still pretty cheap in costing 6 and having 6k double breaker. So, yeah. Now, the last, well, not really the last dragon, but the last dragon for this section is Velyrika Dragon. So we've got 4 copies of Velyrika. Velyrika is by far the most important dragon in the deck. We are ramping super hard because we want to accelerate into an early Velyrika Dragon play. As you know, Velyrika allows you to search for 1 armored dragon from your deck. A lot of the time, you are going to want to search for himself. That way, he can effectively replace himself when he dies, and he can sort of put your opponent on a timer when they run out of removal spells. But you're not going to get him every time. For example, sometimes it's quite useful to get your Dolzark, because say you have Velyrika out, your opponent's bombarding you, you summon him, you search for this guy, summon him next turn, then you kill and get rid of 2 creatures. So that's not bad. Now, another Velyrika target that we are using, 2 Uberdragon Bajulas. So you guys, I hope you guys are happy to see him back. We certainly are. We originally thought about just running one copy of Uberdragon Bajula as a niche pick to help with very specific situations, but we realized that Bajula was actually extremely important in certain matchups. Against control, it's very important to get an early Bajula out, and if you charge one on turn 1s and your shields or it gets discarded, it's not going to be doing a lot of good for you. It's also very good against a lot of mid-range decks that don't have mana acceleration, because Uberdragon Bajula can just wipe their mana sources, and then they can't really they have a harder time of finding ways to overwhelm you with creatures of their own, or just finding ways to get rid of them. So Uberdragon Bajula, very important, and yeah, searchable with Velyrika. Another dragon we have, 4 copies, no, not 4 copies, 3 copies of T-Dad. I was thinking maybe we should play 4 copies, but no, we only have 3 copies. I think 3 copies is enough. Really, this guy is just to give control decks or discarding decks a very nasty surprise, especially if they hit it early in the game. It's quite hard for them to deal with. Very luckily, Magmadragon Jagalzor is a Volcano Dragon, and this guy's an Earth Dragon, but they can both evolve into Uberdragon Bajula, since he can evolve off anyone. The last dragon we are going to cover is one Bazagazeal dragon, also searchable by this guy. Baz is just very useful in case you need a speed attacker, you need to kill something, you need to finish the game, you need to control the board. Baz is a very flexible card, and the mana acceleration and means of cheating out dragons earlier are great support for him. We found that 2 Baz might be pushing it a little bit, just because there are a lot of really good soul swap candidates that come out a lot earlier, like these guys. But, if you wanted to play 2 Bazagazeals, I definitely couldn't fault you for it. Now, the last card we are going to look at is 4 copies of Burst Shot. This is really just so that we don't die to rush or aggro decks. Yes, I know it hits these guys, but it's just too important to not have. Burst Shot is a very good shield trigger. Who would have thought? We think it's a lot of fun to play. Damien, the editor of the channel, certainly likes it a lot. He likes it a lot more than our other decks, which he says are boring. And yeah, I can see why it's pretty exciting. If you really wanted to season to taste, if you were really scared of control, you could probably put in another one of this guy and squeeze in Rumbling Terrahorns, since Velyrika can't search them out. And if you're scared of, other decks, or if you want to be more on the safer side against aggro, maybe you could put in some more fire kill spells and get rid of this guy, or just find ways to get bodies on the field. So yeah, maybe replace him with Phantom Dragon's Flame, Rumbling Terrahorn, Magmar X, something like that. But yeah, that's the deck. I hope you guys liked it. We find that it plays a lot better than the previous version, just because it's not confused with what it wants to be. You're just ramping like crazy, and you're basically saying, hey, either out-resource me or attack me and give me ways to draw cards. Because basically, if your opponent attacks you, then you get cards in your hand. Against control, you are the one who is on the aggressive, and you replace your advantage with Velyrika Dragon. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.